Imagine skipping a shower for one day. You already start feeling it. The hair, the skin, that faint reminder that you're human. Now make that 3 days, a week, 2 weeks. Now picture that, under a burning sun, where the air itself feels baked, the wind stings your skin, and dust doesn't just settle on you. It becomes part of you. That's the wild, wild west. Before we start, don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Shared experiences only motivates us to make more of these videos. Also like and subscribe to MoonyGuide if you enjoy our content. Now, we've all seen it in movies, the lone cowboy riding into town, boots crunching on dry earth, sunlight catching the edge of his hat. It looks cool. But here's the thing, nobody ever smelled good in the Wild West, because the real West smelled like sweat, leather, horse, whiskey, and sometimes just despair. This was the 1850s, the American frontier, the big untamed stretch of land that would one day become Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, California, all those places where people now drive Teslas and complain about the heat. Back then, you didn't have roads, you had trails. You didn't have Wi-Fi, you had coyotes. And water, that was the biggest luxury of them all. Water wasn't for comfort, it was for survival. If you had a bucket of water, you drank it. You didn't waste it on your hair. Today, we talk about Texas like it's a symbol of freedom, big hats, barbecue, and air conditioning set to Arctic. But rewind about 170 years, and Texas was a land where the wind didn't just move through towns, it took the towns with it. In the 1850s, Texas faced one of its worst droughts on record. They called it the dry spell that ate the rivers. And when the rain refused to fall, the wind began to rule. That's when the dust storms came. Walls of dust. Thick, red-brown clouds that rolled across the plains like an ocean made of earth. People said you could hear them coming, a low roar that made your stomach twist before you even saw the sky darken. When a dust storm hit, day turned into night. The sun vanished behind a swirl of grit and soil. People wrapped wet rags around their faces and prayed the storm wouldn't rip the roof right off their homes. Settlers wrote about it in journals. They described how dust got everywhere, in your hair, your food, your bed, even your teeth. You could close your doors, seal your windows, and still wake up to a thin coat of earth on your pillow. One woman in North Texas wrote that she could taste dirt every time she took a breath. And when she tried to wash her face, the water turned brown before she even touched it. That was life. You didn't fight the dirt. You learned to live with it. Now imagine trying to stay clean in that. There were no showers, no indoor plumbing, no Dove, no Lux, no fancy essential oils. If you wanted soap, you made it yourself by boiling animal fat with ashes and lye until it looked like a gray, angry jelly. It worked, sure, but it also burned your skin if you weren't careful. So most people just didn't bother, because by the time you managed to clean up, the next dust storm would undo it anyway. But before we dive too deep into that, let's take a moment. You're listening to MoonyGuide. Welcome back, it's really nice to have you here. This is where we wander through time together to understand how people lived, survived, and sometimes struggled through the things we take for granted. If you've been here before, you already know the drill. Grab a drink, get cozy. And if you're new, hey, I'm Moony. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment, tell me your city, your country. It's always fun to imagine all of us scattered around the world, learning about history together. And if you enjoy this kind of storytelling, give it a like, maybe subscribe. What keeps me motivated to keep digging up dusty old stories like this one. All right, back to the West. Let's talk about hygiene, or the lack of it. In the Wild West, being clean wasn't a personality trait. It was a miracle. Dirt wasn't something people got rid of. It was something they accepted, like bad weather or taxes. Cowboys, farmers, settlers, miners, everyone lived under layers of dust. And after a while, no one even noticed it anymore. If everyone smells equally bad, nobody does. Out on the trail, hygiene looked different. You might go weeks without a proper bath. When you found a river, that was your shower. You'd wade in, let the current take away a layer or two of grime, maybe scrub yourself with sand. If you had soap, great. If not, you used what you had: ashes, vinegar, whiskey. And for your teeth, charcoal, salt, or sometimes just hope. Now there were bathhouses in towns, tiny wooden shacks with a tub, a towel, and a single bucket of hot water. You pay a few cents to use it. But the trick was you didn't always get fresh water. If you were first in line, congratulations, you had cleanish water. If you were fifth or sixth, let's just say, it was a community experience. People joked that a proper bathhouse soak cost you less money than dignity, and yet somehow people managed. They learned to survive not just in dirt, but with it. Clothes were beaten against rocks, hung to dry in the same wind that coated them in dust an hour later. Hair was combed with wooden brushes that caught more grit than strands. Men oiled their beards with whatever was available, sometimes lard, sometimes butter. Because yes, you could smell like dinner and still be considered well-groomed. It's funny in the movies everyone's spotless, but in reality the Wild West probably looked more like a dust-colored filter over humanity itself. And yet people lived, they laughed, they danced, they worked hard and sang harder. It's strange to think that under all that dirt and grit, people still fell in love, still dressed up for Sunday, still cared about how they looked, even if clean was a sliding scale. The 1850s Texas dust storms taught people one thing: you can't fight nature, but you can adapt. If the air was filled with dust, you learned to breathe through a cloth. If the water was scarce, you learned to stretch every drop. And that's really the spirit of the Wild West, not just the guns or the gold or the grit, but the people who somehow managed to stay human when the world itself seemed designed to erase them. So next time your water heater breaks for a day and you feel like your life is over, just remember, somewhere in 1850s Texas, someone was trying to wash their face in mud, and they called that a good day. That's where we'll pause for now, because in part 2, we're diving deeper into the dust storms themselves, how they shaped people's lives, their homes, and their version of hygiene. If the Wild West was wild, the weather made sure it stayed that way. The year was somewhere around 1854. Texas wasn't a state full of skyscrapers and barbecue pits yet. It was a long stretch of raw, wild land where the wind carried more dust than mercy. People came here chasing dreams: gold, land, cattle, survival. But what they didn't expect was the weather, because when the rain stopped coming, the dust started moving. You might have heard of the Dust Bowl from the 1930s, the one that sent entire families packing eastward. But Texas had its own version of that almost a century earlier, smaller, rougher, and somehow even meaner. The drought of the 1850s wasn't just a bad season, it was a full-blown personality crisis for the land itself. Rivers shrank to thin, cracked veins, grass disappeared, animals wandered in circles looking for shade that didn't exist, and then, as if the sky had a grudge, came the storms. A dust storm wasn't just a bit of wind, it was a wall. A roaring, howling, living thing that came rolling across the plains like the end of the world. The air would change first, soft wind, then grit, then the smell of hot dirt, and then the horizon would vanish. A brown wall rising taller than houses, swallowing light and sound in one go. People didn't just see a dust storm, they felt it. Their skin would sting. Their teeth would crunch on air that wasn't supposed to be chewable. It was like standing in a sandblaster, except it lasted for hours, sometimes days. When it hit, you couldn't stay outside. You couldn't even breathe properly. So families would stuff rags into window cracks, shove blankets under doors, and pray. The storm made the world sound like it was growling, a deep, endless hum that rattled the roof and made every nail feel loose. And when it finally passed, it left silence. Not peace, just silence. The kind where you could hear the fine dust settling grain by grain on everything you owned. Imagine waking up the next morning. You step outside and your world has changed color. The sky looks tired. The air tastes old. Your house is half buried in powder. You pick up a bowl from your kitchen table. There's a thin layer of dirt inside it. Your food, your bed, your hair, everything's coated in a ghostly film. You cough. And what comes out isn't spit, it's mud. That's how bad it was. And yet people lived through it, because that's what people do. They adapted. They learned how to live in a place where the land itself tried to evict them. Water became treasure. You could trade a bucket of clean water for almost anything. Some folks walked miles just to fill a single barrel. Others dug wells so deep, they joked they'd hit China before they hit water. And when you finally got some, you guarded it, you drank it. You cooked with it, and if by some miracle there was still a drop left, you washed. But washing didn't mean what it means now. You didn't step into a shower and come out fresh and floral. You dipped a rag, wiped your face, maybe your hands, and that was enough to feel human again. The smell of a person in the Wild West was complex. Sweat, horse, leather, smoke, and dirt, layered together like the world's worst perfume. But nobody judged you for it, because everyone else smelled the same. That was equality, frontier style. If you were extra lucky, you might carry a small piece of homemade soap, the rough kind made from animal fat and ashes. It didn't lather much. It didn't smell nice, but it worked. At least until you realized your skin now smelled faintly like bacon. Let's talk clothes. People in the Wild West didn't have closets full of options. A few shirts, maybe one Sunday best, and that was it. Laundry day wasn't a regular thing, it was a battle. You'd haul your clothes to a nearby creek if it hadn't dried up and start scrubbing. No detergent, no softener, just lye soap and a whole lot of hope. If the clothes were really bad, people used ashes as a kind of scrub. Yes, the same ashes left from cooking fires. Imagine rubbing that on your only shirt, but it worked, sort of. And when you hung it to dry, the same wind that dried it also coated it again in dust. A cycle without end. People got creative. They used bandanas to cover their faces when the storms hit. They wore hats not just for style, but to keep the sky out of their hair. Men grew beards, partly because shaving was annoying in the wind, and partly because beards hid how filthy you were underneath. Women braided their hair tight, pinned it up, and covered it with scarves, because every loose strand was a dust magnet. Some settlers rubbed animal fat into their hair to keep the dust from sticking. It worked in the same way oiling a frying pan works, functional but not exactly glamorous. And yet there was beauty in all of this chaos. When the dust settled and the sun came back, the world looked golden. The air shimmered. The land glowed like old parchment. People would step outside, faces still smudged, clothes still gritty, and look out at the horizon with something close to awe. Because no matter how cruel the storm was, it couldn't erase hope. Daily life went on. You still had to feed the animals, fetch water, patch fences, cook meals. You'd see mothers sweeping dust off tables that would be covered again by sundown. Children running barefoot through grit so fine it stuck between their toes. Men wiping sweat off their necks with shirts that hadn't been clean in weeks. And still every night they sat under the stars, talked, laughed, sang songs about home and rivers and rain that never came. Because if you didn't find joy in the little things, you wouldn't last long out here. Cleanliness became less about appearance and more about feeling alive. A splash of cool water on your face after a long day. A clean shirt that actually smelled like air. A tiny moment where you could say, I'm still human. That was the luxury. That was the victory. And then there were the towns. Small clusters of life surrounded by endless dirt. Every new storm threatened to bury them, but somehow they always dug themselves out. People swept porches with pride. They polished their boots even though the streets were nothing but mud and dust. Because it wasn't about staying clean, it was about trying. That's what made you civilized out here. Not fancy clothes, not big houses, just the effort to stay something more than survival. In letters sent east, settlers often joked that they hadn't seen a white wall in years. Everything was beige, brown, or gray. One farmer wrote that even the chickens looked dusty. Another said his coffee tasted like sand, but at least it's crunchy. That's the kind of humor people develop, the kind that only grows when complaining stops working. Some settlers started building homes partly underground, half dugouts, half houses, to escape the worst of the storms. They called them sadis. They were cool in summer, warm in winter, and protected from the wind. But of course, the walls were made of dirt. So while you escaped the storm outside, you were still technically living inside the problem. Dust found you no matter what. And yet, if you asked those settlers would they leave, most said no. Because despite the hardships, this land meant freedom. You could own your own piece of it. You could build something from nothing, even if that something was constantly covered in dust. That's the strange thing about history. The further back you go, the more you realize how much people were willing to tolerate in exchange for a dream. The modern world gives us filters, face washes, climate control. But the Wild West gave people grit, literally and figuratively. Every storm was a test, every dry day a warning. every drop of water a blessing. So what did hygiene really mean in that context? It wasn't about smelling good. It wasn't about beauty. It was about keeping infections away, staying functional, and holding on to a sense of self. Washing your hands wasn't just a ritual, it was an act of hope. A reminder that beneath all this dirt, you were still you. If you could walk into a Texas town in 1855, you'd probably find it buzzing right after a storm. People dusting off barrels, women beating rugs, kids carrying buckets to refill at the nearest well, the air thick with laughter, grit, and the smell of burning wood. Because when the storm passed, life went on. And that rhythm, that cycle of destruction and rebuilding, became the heartbeat of the West. Sometimes it wasn't the storm that got you, it was what came after. All that dust in the lungs, in the eyes, in the water. People developed coughs that lasted months. Some lost their voices completely. Doctors, if there even was one in town, would recommend whiskey and rest. And that was pretty much the full medical plan. But even then, they'd laugh about it. Call it frontier flu. Drink a bit more whiskey and keep going. Because if you stopped to feel sorry for yourself, you'd fall behind. And in the West, falling behind could mean being left behind. There's a saying from that era, cleanliness is for the rich, toughness is for the rest. It wasn't meant to be poetic. It was just true. When everything around you was chaos, being clean was almost defiant. A small act of rebellion against a land that wanted to turn you to dust. And somehow that makes it beautiful. So if you were a settler in 1850s Texas, surviving through those storms, you'd end every day the same way, tired, covered in dirt, and still strangely proud that you made it another day. Because out here, that was enough. That's the thing about the Wild West. It wasn't wild because of the people. It was wild because of what they endured. And the dust, it wasn't just in the air. It was in the stories, the songs, the language, the legacy. A part of the land and a part of them. Next time you complain about having to clean your car after a windy day, remember that someone, somewhere in 1854, was digging their house out of a sand dune. And they didn't even have Wi-Fi to post about it. In the next part, we'll go deeper into the trail life, how cowboys, travelers, and wanderers managed to keep themselves sort of clean while constantly on the move. We'll talk about the strange ways they improvised, the tools they carried, and how bathing became an adventure of its own. Because if you think the dust was bad, wait till you meet the rivers. If you've ever complained about running out of hot water halfway through a shower, congratulations. You would not have lasted a single week on the trail. Because for most travelers in the Wild West, bathing wasn't just rare, it was almost mythical. Picture a wagon train rolling across the plains. Dozens of people. Oxen, horses, carts filled with food, tools, and whatever they managed to cram from their old lives. Now imagine all that, moving slowly under a sun that doesn't blink. Days turning into weeks. The same shirt, the same boots, the same smell. Water wasn't for washing, it was for surviving. Every drop counted. You drank it, you cooked with it. And if by some miracle there was still enough left to splash on your face, that was your bath. It's hard for us to imagine now. We're surrounded by running water, clean towels, and shampoos that smell like tropical vacations. But out there on that endless trail, cleanliness wasn't comfort. It was strategy. You washed not to feel fresh, but to avoid infection, disease, and the smell that could attract animals. Because yes, sometimes even bears could smell you before you smelled them. Let's talk about the rivers, those long, winding saviors in the desert. Whenever the trail crossed one, travelers turned into opportunists. You could see it in their faces, that moment of hesitation. Do we waste time and water to wash, or do we keep moving before sundown? If the weather was right and danger felt far enough, they went for it. Men stripped down and jumped into the shallows. Women waded in carefully, always keeping an eye on the wagons. And for a few fleeting minutes, everyone felt human again. The first splash was always shock, the water colder than expected. Then came laughter, a little shouting, and the sound of years of dust swirling away. But even in those moments, hygiene had rules. You didn't bathe upstream. That's where people collected drinking water. You went downstream, away from the camp, where nobody minded if the water got murky. Soap, if they had any, was handmade, animal fat, ashes, and lye. Rough on the skin, harsh on the eyes, but it did its job. And just when you started feeling clean, the wind picked up again. A soft gust carrying dust right back onto your wet skin. Congratulations, you were now muddy instead of dusty. That's frontier irony. You could win the battle but never the war. So how often did they bathe? The honest answer, not much. Once a week if you were lucky. Once every few weeks if you were. Some cowboys claimed to wash only twice a year, once before summer, once before winter. And they wore that as a badge of honor. Because out there, being clean didn't make you tough. Enduring the dirt did. You might think they all smelled terrible, and yeah, you're not wrong. But smell is relative. When everyone around you shares the same scent of sweat, leather, smoke, and horses, you stop noticing. You normalize the funk. It becomes part of the air you breathe. For grooming, things were creative. Razors existed, but they were expensive, hard to replace, and terrifyingly sharp. So most men simply gave up shaving altogether. Beards weren't just fashion, they were function. A layer of protection against wind, cold, and sunburn. And if you were covered in dust, a beard at least gave the illusion that it belonged there. Cowboys used whatever they had to tame the mess, bits of bacon grease, bare fat, even axle grease from wagons. Not ideal, but hey, shiny is shiny. Haircuts were a social affair. Whenever the wagon train stopped long enough, someone with steady hands or enough courage became the barber. A knife, a pair of scissors, sometimes just shears meant for sheep. You'd sit on a crate while flies buzzed around and hope they didn't sneeze mid-snip. Clean lines, fade, forget it. You got one length, short enough so it doesn't tangle, but people loved it anyway. That moment after a haircut, lighter, cleaner, refreshed, was rare. And rare things felt like luxury. Women on the trail had it far tougher. Keeping hair neat was nearly impossible. Dust clung to every strand, combs broke. Water was rationed, so they braided, tight, practical braids that could last for days. And when it got too tangled, too heavy, too unbearable, they cut it. A quiet decision, often at night by the fire. A piece of themselves left behind on the dirt. But the next morning, they'd tie a scarf or a bonnet, stand a little taller, and keep going. Because even without the hair, the strength stayed. And yet, even with all that dust and grime, vanity didn't die. People still wanted to look decent. Travelers carried tiny mirrors made of polished tin. They'd check their faces, fix their hats, maybe clean the dirt from their teeth with twigs. Because the West may have been wild, but pride was still human. Speaking of teeth, oral hygiene on the trail was an adventure of its own. Toothbrushes existed, but not everyone owned one. Instead, people chewed on chewing sticks, small branches, usually from willow or mesquite. The fibers would fray at the ends and become natural brushes. It wasn't minty fresh, but it worked. For toothpaste, there was creativity, crushed charcoal, salt mixed with water, sometimes baking soda if you were fancy. You'd scrub, rinse with whatever was left in your canteen and call it a day. Bad breath wasn't a deal breaker. Everyone's breath could knock out a cactus. Now let's talk about hands. Hands were the dirtiest part of anyone's life out there. They cooked, cleaned, fixed wagons, butchered animals, handled guns, dug trenches, you name it. Soap was precious. So many people just wiped their hands on their pants and hoped for the best. It sounds awful, and it kind of was, but they built immunity the hard way. The kind of immunity modern hand sanitizers would write poetry about. And the nails. Let's just say manicures weren't trending. Nails broke, cracked, filled with dirt. Some travelers wore gloves when they could afford them, not for style, but to keep their hands from literally falling apart. Cowboys sometimes carried small knives just to scrape dirt out from under their nails. Usually right before dinner, which makes the next part ironic. Cooking on the trail was a dusty art. You'd wash your pan with sand because there wasn't enough water to waste. You'd shake the grit out of your beans and pretend not to feel the crunch. And when you finally sat down to eat, you didn't think about hygiene. You thought about getting enough calories to make it another mile. Bathing wasn't just physical, it was emotional. After days of grime, sweat, and exhaustion, stepping into water was rebirth. Even if it was cold, muddy, or full of fish. For a few minutes, the world stopped being hard. The dust floated away. The air smelled like life again. And when they got out, they didn't towel off. They stood in the sun, letting it dry them like a blessing. Because that's what the West taught you, gratitude for small mercies. There were tricks to feeling cleaner without water. rubbing yourself with dry cloth to take off surface dust, shaking clothes out in the wind, using ashes or sand to scrub oily skin. Some carried herbs sage, juniper, wild mint, and rubbed them into their clothes for a fresher scent. You smelled like a walking campfire garden, but it was better than the alternative. Let's not forget boots. People basically lived in them. And the smell inside. Let's just say you didn't want to take them off near the fire unless you wanted to clear the camp. Feet were the quiet heroes of the trail, walked on, ignored, and often wounded. Blisters, infections, fungus, all part of the deal. Some rubbed tallow animal fat on cracked heels. Some just ignored the pain and kept walking. There was no spa day. Only hope these boots hold out until tomorrow. Despite all this, hygiene was communal. You helped each other out. If someone found a stream, they'd call others over. If someone had extra soap, they shared it. If a man got lice, and trust me, everyone did at some point, others helped shave his head. Because you couldn't survive alone on the frontier. Cleanliness, like everything else, was teamwork. At night, when the fire burned low and the stars stretched endless above, you could hear water boiling in metal pots. People washing hands, faces, sometimes just their feet. It wasn't much, but it was something. A way of saying, I made it through another day and I still care. That's the part most stories skip, the small, quiet moments of humanity that happened between the chaos. Because survival wasn't just about guns and grit. It was also about routine, ritual, the decision to wash your face even when the world gave you every reason not to. Some travelers wrote in diaries about the feeling of clean skin. One described it as the difference between man and animal. Another said, I would trade a pound of coffee for a cup of warm water. That's how deep the need ran, not vanity, but identity. Being clean meant remembering who you were before the dust. And as the months dragged on, trails became marked not just by footprints and wagon ruts, but by memories of where people found water. A hidden spring, a shaded pond, a place that smelled of wet earth instead of sweat. Those became holy places, whispered about around campfires, shared like secrets. Because finding water meant finding life. When travelers finally reached towns, the first thing they often did, even before eating, was bathe. Bathhouses lined the main streets, each promising hot water 10 cents. Imagine stepping into one after weeks on the trail. Steam, soap, a towel that didn't smell like dirt. It must have felt like heaven. People came out red-faced, smiling, lighter. They'd cut their nails, trim their beards, and finally smell like civilization again. That feeling didn't last long. Dust found them the next morning. But it didn't matter. For one night they were clean, and that was enough to make the world feel right. So when you think of those long, hard trails, don't just imagine gunfights and sunsets. Imagine the little victories, a handful of water, a clean face, a quick wash before the storm. That's what kept people human. Because in the Wild West, survival wasn't just about strength, it was about staying yourself. And sometimes, all it took was a splash of cold water and the will to keep walking. When we picture the Wild West, we usually see men, cowboys, gunslingers, prospectors with faces carved by sun and stubbornness. But behind them, often a few steps back, sometimes right beside, were women. And they were surviving the same storms, the same dirt, the same heat. Only difference, they did it in corsets. The frontier woman was a paradox, soft voice, strong back. Expected to cook, clean, nurse, birth, farm, and somehow still smell like lilacs, even when lilacs were hundreds of miles away. They didn't have running water, they didn't have perfume, they barely had privacy. And yet they built homes out of nothing. They raised families in tents. They made civilization bloom in dust. Daily life started before dawn. Haul water, stoke fire, bake bread, feed livestock, sweep dirt off a floor made of, you guessed it, more dirt. Every task came with a layer of grit. Even washing dishes meant scooping muddy water from a barrel, and hopping it wasn't the same bucket used to wash boots. Hands cracked, hair tangled. Skin burned, peeled, and healed again. And still, they wore long skirts, high collars, and petticoats, fabric traps for heat and dust. Fashion met endurance in the most uncomfortable way possible. Let's talk about clothing. Layers on layers. Chemise, corset, drawers, petticoats, overskirt, bodice. In summer heat that could fry an egg on a shovel. They sweated, of course. But deodorant wasn't invented yet, at least not the kind we know. Instead, they used homemade powders, a mix of crushed herbs, sometimes baking soda if they had it. It masked, not erased, the smell of survival. Perfume existed, but it was precious. One bottle could last years. You'd dab it behind the ears on Sundays and hope it drowned out the rest. And then there was the most private challenge of all, the one history rarely talks about: menstruation. No pads, no tampons, no painkillers, just women, the wilderness, and a whole lot of improvisation. Most women used cloth, old linen, cotton, torn rags from dresses too worn to mend. They folded them thick, washed them when they could, and reused them until the fabric gave up. Sometimes moss or dried grasses were used for padding. Sometimes nothing at all, just endurance and a quiet wish for the days to pass. They didn't talk about it much. It was private, considered impolite to mention. But among women, there was an unspoken understanding, a look, a nod, a helping hand when someone needed extra cloth or rest. Privacy was rare. A cabin with 6 people offered about as much privacy as an open tent. So when those days came, women found small corners behind wagons near rivers or inside root cellars. Moments of solitude carved out of chaos. Some carried herbal remedies and raspberry leaf tea for cramps, willow bark for pain. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. And it came from knowledge passed woman to woman, generation to generation. The smell, the stains, the discomfort, all handled with quiet dignity. Because there wasn't time to feel embarrassed. There was work to do. You cooked. You churned butter. You tended to children while your body did its own exhausting routine. There was no such thing as taking the day off. You simply kept going. Childbirth, that was another test entirely. No hospitals, no anesthesia, just midwives, boiled water, and prayers. The survival rate wasn't kind for mothers or bobbies, but women did it anyway, again and again, building families that carried the West into the future. Pain became ordinary, strength became invisible, because out there no one called you a hero for surviving, they just expected it. Hygiene after childbirth was just as difficult. Water had to be boiled. Cloths had to be kept clean somehow. Infections were common and medical help could be days away. Women learned to make poultices, salves, and teas, calendula for wounds, honey for healing, whiskey for courage. These were the medicines of necessity, simple, rough, but effective enough to keep them alive. It wasn't all pain, though. There were moments of laughter, women sharing stories while scrubbing clothes by the river, gossip floating over the sound of water slapping fabric, hands raw, hearts light. That was their social network. That was their therapy. Men often didn't ask questions, not out of cruelty, but discomfort. Women's matters were simply women's matters, but the smart ones noticed. They saw the way their wives endured, the way they managed to keep life moving even when everything else felt like it was falling apart. Behind every clean shirt and warm meal was someone who refused to quit, even when she hadn't slept, hadn't rested, hadn't felt well for days. When towns began to form, real ones, with churches, schools, and stores, women brought order. They founded sewing circles, church committees, teaching groups. They built hospitals, bathhouses, and boarding houses. Wherever they went, civilization followed. Because cleanliness wasn't just about hygiene, it was about identity. About saying, we are more than survivors. We are builders. And yes, they got creative. Some women stitched small pouches to hold their cloth pads in place. Some used string or ribbon to tie them. They boiled the fabric when possible, dried it in the sun, folded it neatly for reuse. It sounds tedious, and it was, but it was their system. A routine that turned discomfort into control. The heat made everything harder, sweat mixed with dust. Skin chafed under layers of fabric. So women used cornstarch or talc as powder to soothe rashes. They carried fans, wiped their faces with damp cloths, and refused to complain because complaining didn't make the chores go away. Once in a while, they'd get a bath day, a real one. Hot water heated over a fire poured into a wooden tub. Children first, then the husband. Then finally, the woman who filled and carried every bucket. By the time it was her turn, the water was lukewarm and cloudy, but she still sank in with a sigh that came from the soul. For a few minutes, she wasn't a pioneer or a mother or a worker. She was just a person, warm, weightless, and clean. There's something almost sacred about that image. A woman in a cabin lit by lamplight, surrounded by quiet. Her hair pinned up, her shoulders sunk low, her eyes half closed. The storm outside might rage, the wind might howl. But inside, for a little while, she was safe. Hygiene wasn't luxury, it was identity. It reminded her that she was still herself under all that dust, that she still belonged to something softer, calmer, and human. Even if no one saw it, she knew. And that was enough. Women supported one another in ways history rarely records. They traded recipes for soap. They exchanged herbs for skin care and cramps. They watched each other's children when someone needed rest. They created sisterhoods long before the word existed. A traveler might look at a town and see rough cabins and mud streets. But if you stepped inside those cabins, you'd smell lavender soap drying by the stove, bread baking, quilts folded with precision, traces of care in a world that offered none. It's easy to romanticize the West, sunsets, freedom, adventure. But it was women who turned survival into stability. They cleaned wounds. They washed clothes. They turned rivers into laundries and cabins into homes. They taught hygiene to children who'd never known comfort. They insisted on washing hands before supper. They brought small rituals of civility into chaos, and those rituals changed everything. The first bathhouse in many frontier towns wasn't opened by a businessman, it was started by women. They knew the value of clean water and they turned it into a service, sometimes charging a few cents, sometimes just trading it for food. Soon, bathhouses became social centers, gossip hubs, therapy corners, the frontier's version of a spa day. And in those spaces, women talked, shared, laughed. Because hygiene wasn't just about cleanliness, it was about connection. The menstrual cloths, the herbal remedies, the shared bathwater, all of it formed a quiet ecosystem of resilience. Each act said, "We matter." It wasn't grand or glamorous, but it built the foundation of every future comfort we take for granted today. Running water, sanitary pads, soap that smells like rain. All of it traces back to those early hands, those calloused, determined hands that refused to stop caring. Imagine that now. You sitting in a clean room, hot shower a few feet away, and somewhere in history, a woman your age boiled rags over a fire, praying the wind didn't blow ashes into them. Perspective changes things, doesn't it? The Wild West made heroes out of people who didn't ask to be heroic. And the women, they were the quietest heroes of all. They didn't ride into town guns blazing. They didn't chase fame or fortune. They just endured. They kept their families alive. They kept hope clean in a dirty world. So next time you hear the phrase tough as a cowboy, remember there was someone tougher. Someone who faced pain in silence, who turned dust into order and discomfort into dignity. She didn't just survive the West, she softened it. And if that isn't the definition of strength, I don't know what is. In the next part, we'll climb the social ladder, see how hygiene shifted between the poor, the wealthy, and everyone in between. How soap became status, how bathhouses became symbols of progress, and how the Wild West slowly learned to call itself civilized. Because dust might cover everything, but it couldn't hide ambition. The West wasn't equal, not by a long shot. Money, gender, luck, they all drew invisible lines in the dust. And hygiene, that too, had its hierarchy. Cleanliness back then wasn't just comfort, it was a class marker, a sign that you had water to spare, soap to waste, time to take care of yourself instead of chasing cattle or gold. Let's start with the bottom rung, the wanderers, the cowhands, the drifters. They lived under the same sky every night with the same stars, the same ache, the same dust. Their hygiene kit was simple. A handkerchief, a bit of lye soap, maybe a comb if they hadn't lost it to a poker game. Water was precious. You didn't wash for vanity, you washed to stay alive. Hands before eating, face before sleep. Anything more was a luxury. If you found a creek, you used it fast. Splash, scrub, rinse before the horses drank it dry. And then came the smell. Every traveler carried one. Sweat mixed with leather, horse mixed with smoke, and a hint of whiskey, the perfume of the plains. Nobody judged you for smelling bad. They'd only judge you if you smelled too good. That meant you weren't working hard enough. Cowboys were practical. They washed shirts in rivers, pinned them to their saddles to dry. Used sand to scrub stains, ash mixed with fat to clean hands. It worked roughly. Your skin hated you for it, but your shirt looked half decent. Toothbrush, rare. They chewed twigs, sometimes rubbed salt or charcoal over their teeth. It was less about minty freshness, more about scraping off the evidence of yesterday's jerky. Now move up the ladder the small-town folk. Shopkeepers, teachers, blacksmiths, bakers. These people had roofs over their heads, maybe a well in the backyard. Enough stability to care about appearance. Here, hygiene started to shape identity. You couldn't run a bakery if you smelled like a horse pen. You couldn't teach children if your hands were cracked with grime. So townsfolk cleaned up as best they could. A small tin basin became the household treasure. Every morning, a ritual: pour water, wash face, neck, hands. Soap made from animal fat and lye, harsh, but it worked. It smelled aggressive, let's say. But if your skin stung afterward, that was proof of cleanliness. Women often added herbs or flower petals to soften it: lavender, rose, sometimes pine needles. Men preferred whiskey. Yes, really. It wasn't just for drinking, it doubled as aftershave, disinfectant, and in a pinch, courage. Bathing day came once a week, usually Saturday. Why Saturday? Because Sunday was church. And if you were going to meet your neighbors, you might as well smell like something other than hard work. The whole family shared the same bath water. Father first, then the mother. Then the children, oldest to youngest. By the end, the water looked like weak soup. Still, everyone went to bed that night feeling reborn, or at least less sticky. As towns grew, so did ambition. Cleanliness became currency. Hotels bragged about having fresh water every day. Barbers offered not just shaves, but full sponge baths for a few cents extra. Soap makers turned recipes into businesses. A good bar of soap could earn loyalty faster than a sheriff with a badge. Then came the social elite, the merchants, landowners, and politicians. They lived differently. They smelled differently too. These were the people who could afford imported soap from the East Coast, sometimes from Europe, wrapped in paper that looked fancier than the mayor's office. Their bathrooms weren't really rooms, yet more like well-decorated corners with basins and mirrors. But they had towels, cologne, combs, even brushes with silver handles. Cleanliness here wasn't just about health. It was about power. Looking refined meant you belonged to the future, not the frontier. A clean face meant civilization. A clean shirt meant respectability. A clean home meant success. And so soap became social. There's something fascinating about how hygiene became an act of performance. When someone walked down a dusty street in polished boots and a pressed coat, everyone noticed. It wasn't arrogance, it was advertising. It said, "I have water, I have soap, I have time." Three things many people didn't. Bathhouses exploded in popularity around this time. What started as a necessity turned into an industry. You could pay a dime for a public bath, a few minutes of steam, a wooden tub, and a bucket of hot water. You'd come out lighter, happier, ready to face the grit again. For some, it was luxury. For others, survival. Bathhouses became social crossroads. Miners, merchants, travelers, gamblers, all sitting in steam together, equal for a few quiet moments. And there, under the hiss of hot water, gossip flowed faster than soap bubbles. Some bathhouses even offered add-ons: massage, laundry, a haircut. You could walk in a drifter and walk out a gentleman for a day at least. It's funny how a hot bath could change a person's entire attitude. The West was brutal, but a tub full of steam. That was hope in liquid form. The barbershop was another hub of hygiene. Straight razors, shaving cream, and stories thick enough to fill newspapers. It was therapy with a blade. Men came for a trim and stayed for the talk: politics, cattle prices, romance, rumors. You could smell bay rum, tobacco, and gossip all at once. Barbers were trusted more than doctors sometimes. A steady hand, a kind word, and hot water, that was medicine enough. For women, the equivalent was the milliner's shop or the general store's back room, where soaps, powders, and combs were kept like hidden treasures. Hair care was serious business. Washing took hours. So many brushed instead, 100 strokes before bed, because someone said it made hair shine. Homemade oils, vinegar rinses, herbal infusions. The beauty rituals of the West were equal parts science and sorcery. And every one of them carried a story passed from mother to daughter, whispered from friend to friend. By the late 1800s, hygiene began shifting from necessity to culture. Magazines advertised soaps that brought the East to the West. Scented powders promised refinement. Tooth powders came in tins with shiny labels. Cleanliness became modernity. If you smelled good, you were civilized. If you didn't, well, you were behind the times. But here's the irony. The same cowboys who mocked fancy soap, once they tried it, they never went back. There are stories of ranch hands walking 30 miles to the nearest bathhouse after payday, then strutting back to camp like kings. Clean skin felt like a rebirth, like maybe civilization wasn't the enemy after all. Even water became social. Some towns had public wells where people gathered to fill buckets, yes, but also to talk. Who was courting who was leaving for California, who just got a new bar of rose soap from St. Louis. Every drop carried more than dust, it carried connection. Now picture the mayor's wife in a lace dress sitting at her vanity, silver brush, glass perfume bottle, sunlight catching on her mirror as she hums quietly, brushing her hair. She's part of the same story, but in a different chapter, where cleanliness meant elegance and elegance meant influence. Her home smells of lavender and beeswax polish. Her table is covered with lace doilies. Her towels are embroidered. All this just a few streets away from miners sleeping in the dirt. That contrast, that's the real West. A place where progress and grit lived side by side, eyeing each other warily. The saloon keeper sat somewhere in between. Not poor, not polished, practical. He washed his hands before pouring whiskey, wiped glasses with whatever cloth was nearby. His floor, let's just say it had seen better days. But he kept himself tidy because appearance meant trust. No one wants whiskey from a man who looks like he bathes in it. It's fascinating, isn't it? The same soap that scrubbed a cowboy's hands washed a mayor's collar. The same water that cleaned a child's face was hauled from the same muddy river. Hygiene was the great equalizer, and yet it was also a divider. If you were clean, you were respectable. If you weren't, you were wild. A simple bath could decide your reputation. Newspapers started printing etiquette advice. Wash daily if possible. Change undergarments twice a week. Use cologne sparingly. For the first time, cleanliness had rules. And the West slowly, grudgingly began to follow them. Doctors, too, began talking about hygiene as health, not just habit. They noticed that cleaner camps had fewer fevers, fewer infections. Soap became medicine. Boiled water became prevention. And suddenly hygiene wasn't just fashion, it was science. By the 1880s, soap brands were everywhere. Posters, brochures, traveling salesmen with shining samples. Names like Pears, Ivory, and Palmolive were starting to appear, signals of a world that was turning modern. Imagine how strange that must have felt going from river sand to scented bars that promised purity. It was like civilization arriving in a paper wrapper. The divide between classes was still wide, but soap began to bridge it. Everyone wanted to feel clean. Everyone wanted that little slice of luxury. Because no matter who you were, drifter or doctor, washing off the day felt the same. That first touch of warm water on tired skin, that deep exhale, it wasn't just hygiene, it was humanity. Cleanliness became the new badge of belonging, and with it came pride. Homes got tidier, streets got swept. Bathhouses turned into businesses, then into institutions. By the turn of the century, the Wild West wasn't so wild anymore. It was bathing itself into modern America. Funny, isn't it? Civilization didn't ride in on a train or a telegram. It arrived in a bucket of hot water, one rinse at a time. And maybe that's the lesson buried in the dust. Progress doesn't always start with invention or revolution. Sometimes it starts with a bar of soap, a basin, a person deciding they want to feel clean in a dirty world. That's what built the West, not just courage, but care. Next up, we'll peek into food, teeth, and mouth care, because hygiene didn't stop at skin. Out there, a smile could mean survival, and what they used to keep those smiles shining. Let's just say it wasn't toothpaste as you know it. If you want to know when the Wild West stopped being wild, don't look for sheriffs or telegraph lines. Look for bathhouses. That's when things started changing, when people decided dust didn't have to win every day. At first, towns were just clusters of hope, a few wooden buildings, a blacksmith's clang, a saloon that never slept. Water barrels lined the streets, baking in the sun. There were more horses than humans. and hygiene still optional. But where people stayed, dust settled, and with dust came the desire to wash it away. It started simple. A merchant realized travelers would pay for a hot bath, so he set up a room, a big copper tub, and a stove to heat water, 1 dime per bath. Bring your own towel if you had one. It worked. Soon, bathhouses popped up everywhere: Dodge City, Tombstone, Abilene, Deadwood, each with the same promise: for a few coins, you could buy back your dignity. The process was an art form. You walk in filthy, sunburned, smelling like the trail. You'd hand over your coin, maybe 2 if you wanted extra clean. The attendant would fill the tub bucket by bucket with water heated over a roaring stove. Steam filled the air. Soap waited on the edge. A small window cracked open for ventilation, though the air outside wasn't much better. You sink in, muscles unwinding, grime melting off like guilt. The water turned brown within minutes, but you didn't care. For that half hour, you weren't a cowboy or a prospector or a weary traveler. You were human again. Bathhouses became more than businesses. They became symbols of proof that civilization had arrived. Because when people start building places to get clean, you know they plan to stay. Now every bathhouse had its personality. Some were plain, 1 room, a tub, and an old lady guarding the soap like treasure. Others were grand, polished floors, separate tubs, even curtains for privacy. And if you really wanted luxury, you could go to the ones with hot stones, scented oils, and towels that didn't smell like last week. The fancier towns, San Francisco, Denver, maybe Santa Fe, even had bathhouses modeled after Turkish spas. Steam rooms, tiled floors, attendants offering scrubs. It was less frontier survival and more frontier spa day. Of course, not everyone could afford it. A dime was a meal to some folks. So rivers, creeks, and rain barrels remained the poor man's bathtub. And yet the idea of bathing, of choosing to feel clean, started spreading. You could tell when a town was growing. The streets got swept, windows got washed, and bathhouses multiplied faster than saloons. Some people joked that you could measure a town's progress by how many bathtubs it owned. No joke, it wasn't far from the truth. In frontier papers, advertisements for bathhouses began to appear right next to wanted posters. Hot baths 10 cents, clean towels, satisfaction guaranteed. It was progress, 1 rinse at a time. Barbershops often doubled as mini bathhouses. You'd walk in for a shave, walk out with a full wash. Sometimes the barber even added fragrance, bay rum, lemon, or mint if you were lucky. It sounds simple now, but back then, that was self-care deluxe. Bathhouses had their own etiquette too. You didn't linger unless you paid for it. You didn't splash. You didn't complain if the water was lukewarm, because heating it took effort. And you always tipped the attendant, because no one respected the person who handled other people's bathwater more than a bathhouse regular. Soon, bathhouses became meeting points, half social club, half sanctuary. Men discussed cattle prices between tubs. Gamblers made deals over soap suds. Women gathered during slower hours, trading news, herbs, recipes. The sound of laughter mixed with the hiss of steam. It was the heartbeat of a town slowly remembering what comfort felt like. Bathhouses also had a deeper role. They quietly shaped the concept of public health. People didn't yet know about bacteria or germ theory, not really. But they knew this: clean people got sick less often. So when epidemics hit, cholera, typhoid, influenza, towns started connecting the dots. They cleaned wells, built drainage ditches, promoted bathing as a civic duty, not just a luxury. Cleanliness is next to godliness, they said. But it was also next to not dying of fever. The civilizing of the West wasn't only about law and order. It was about plumbing, about sanitation, about figuring out that if you put your outhouse too close to your well, you'd be drinking your own problems. Practical enlightenment, 1 mistake at a time. City planners started thinking differently. Streets were laid with drains. Public wells got fenced to keep animals out. And eventually, the greatest invention of all, indoor plumbing, crept its way west. Slowly, painfully, bucket by bucket. By the 1880s, big cities like San Francisco and Denver had real sewage systems, pipes, water pumps, even bathhouses connected to running water. Meanwhile, smaller towns still filled tubs the old-fashioned way, bucket after bucket, carried by whoever drew the shortest straw. But progress was coming, and everyone could feel it, even if their backs ached from hauling it. For women, bathhouses offered rare freedom, a moment to breathe, a moment to feel human without being surrounded by chores. They soak, chat, and share stories of the trail, the family, the future. And just like that, the West's first wellness culture was born in wooden tubs with homemade soap and borrowed towels. Bathhouses also sparked small revolutions in entrepreneurship. Widows, immigrants, and enterprising families ran them, turning cleanliness into livelihood. One famous bathhouse in Deadwood was run by a woman named Dora Dufran, better known for other businesses, sure, but her bathhouse became legendary because people came for the gossip as much as the water. Cleanliness had become conversation. The railroad changed everything. It carried people, letters, gold, and soap. Fancy, fragrant, Eastern soap. Suddenly, the frontier smelled like lavender, citrus, sometimes even almond. Hotels advertised modern bathing facilities. Towns competed over who had the cleanest streets, and bathing turned from necessity into ritual. The phrase "taking the waters" became fashionable, borrowed from European spa towns. If you could afford it, you didn't just bathe, you soaked. You traveled to mineral springs, claiming health benefits for every ache and pain. The same people who once bathed in rivers were now paying to sit in hot springs surrounded by marble columns. Civilization had come full circle with bubbles. And yet, even with all this progress, the West never completely lost its grit. Bathhouses coexisted with muddy boots and dusty hats. Because no matter how civilized a town got, the desert always waited outside, ready to remind you who was boss. You could step out of a bathhouse spotless, and 5 minutes later, a gust of wind would baptize you in sand again. Cleanliness was temporary, but the desire for it, that was permanent. Towns began organizing cleanup days. Citizens swept streets, whitewashed fences, cleared trash. They planted trees to hold down the dust. It wasn't about vanity. It was about pride, claiming this is home. The Wild West was turning domestic. Bathhouses even shaped politics. Mayors took credit for improved sanitation. Doctors preached hygiene as patriotism. Teachers instructed children to wash their hands, a radical idea back then. Soap became propaganda for progress, and then the first advertisements hit newspapers. Illustrations of glowing, spotless women, clean, smiling men, captions that promised purity, prosperity, and progress. It was marketing gold. Clean people looked civilized and civilization sold. The funny part, half those towns still had outhouses, but no one cared. They were trying, and trying was everything. By the 1890s, bathhouses were evolving again. Some became luxury spas. Some became medical clinics. Others faded as private baths entered homes. Indoor plumbing was the final nail in the coffin for public bathhouses, and the first brick in the foundation of modern hygiene. Imagine that transformation. Just a few decades, the frontier went from communal tubs to porcelain bathtubs with brass faucets, from soap made of animal fat to perfumed bars imported from Paris, from dusty wells to gleaming water towers. Civilization didn't just arrive, it soaked in. Still, for the old-timers, nothing beat the simplicity of a bathhouse. The warmth, the chatter, the sense that, even if just for a little while, everyone was equal, stripped of rank, dirt, and pretense. Steam doesn't care who you are. That's the quiet poetry of it, really. The same water that washed gold dust off a prospector's hands also washed the perfume off a mayor's wife. The same soap bubbles rose for the rich and the poor alike. For a few minutes in that cloud of steam, the West forgot its hierarchy. It just breathed. Cleanliness united people before law or politics ever did. It taught them to care for themselves, for others, for the place they called home. That was the true civilizing force. Not guns, not gold. Soap, a bucket of hot water, a town that smelled just a little less like desperation. You can almost picture it, dusk settling over a small frontier town. Bathhouse lanterns glowing, steam drifting out of open windows, laughter echoing through the street. The wind still carries dust, sure, but it also carries something new, the scent of progress. And from that scent grew everything else: schools, hospitals, communities, cities. Because once people started caring about being clean, they started caring about staying alive. The West didn't civilize overnight. It cleaned itself slowly. One person, one bath, one bar of soap at a time. And that's how the Wild West became just the West. In the next part, we'll dig into what people put in their bodies, how they ate, how they brushed, and how they kept their teeth from falling out halfway through dinner. Because the real question isn't just how they stayed clean, but how they kept smiling while doing it. Picture this: noon sun hammering down, stomach growling like a thunderhead, and all you've got in your saddlebag is hardtack. That brick-shaped bread was a cruel joke baked into history: flour, water, salt, and despair. Crack it wrong and you'd chip a tooth. So people dunked it in coffee or whiskey, whichever softened faster. Add beans cooked with bacon grease, maybe dried apples if luck rode beside you, and that was dinner. Protein, starch, and the constant reminder that culinary dreams die young on the prairie. Vegetables, rare visitors, fresh fruit, practically myth. Everything had to last dried, salted, smoked. So people got creative. They fried cornmeal cakes, roasted whatever critter crossed their path, brewed coffee thick enough to double as tar. It filled the belly, but it didn't do the teeth any favors. The frontier smile dentistry in the Wild West was experimental. If your tooth hurt, you had 3 options. 1. Ignore it. 2. Yank it. 3. Pray. Dentists were often blacksmiths or barbers moonlighting with pliers. Anesthetics: a shot of whiskey and a friend to hold you down. It's not exaggeration, some carried their own tooth-pulling tools. A good set of tongs was worth more than gold. Imagine the sound of iron scraping enamel, the crack, the curse, the relief that followed. No wonder people smiled with their mouths closed in old photos. If you did find a real dentist, maybe in San Francisco or St. Louis, it cost a fortune. And without modern understanding of bacteria, fillings didn't last long. So the frontier grin was often a gap-toothed badge of survival. Cleaning the mouth, primitive but proud toothbrushes existed, sure, but only the rich imported them. Everyone else made do. They chewed twigs, willow, licorice, birch. They rubbed teeth with salt, ashes, or crushed charcoal. And when baking soda appeared later, it felt like magic dust. One early frontier recipe went like this: mix equal parts salt and soot. Rub daily with linen cloth. Romantic, right? Still, it worked sort of. Not minty fresh, but less likely to kill you. People also gargled whatever they had: vinegar, whiskey, even sage leaf water. Mint wasn't common, but tobacco was. And tobacco breath could knock over a mule. That's where cloves and cinnamon sticks came in, the 19th century version of chewing gum. Frontier folks kept them in pockets, chewing them between meals, pretending it helped. Spoiler, it didn't, but at least it smelled optimistic. Food and social class, dining divides: not everyone ate from the same plate. Ranchers and cowhands lived on the road diet: beans, salt pork, biscuits. Townsfolk got more variety: bread, vegetables, sometimes canned peaches. The upper crust merchants, mayors, madams imported wine, coffee, chocolate. The wider the wallet, the better the teeth, or at least the whiter the replacements. Silver fillings became fashionable. Porcelain false teeth imported from the East. Nothing said "I've made it" like a full set of fake molars. Coffee, whiskey, and the color brown frontier coffee was a lifestyle. Brewed strong, boiled till bitter, poured black. Add sugar if you had it, usually not. Add condensed milk if you were lucky, maybe once a month. That much coffee stained teeth faster than dust stuck to boots. But it kept people alive. Caffeine meant motion, and motion meant survival. And whiskey was medicine, mouthwash, currency. Some frontier doctors prescribed it for toothache: swish, swallow, repeat until you forget why your tooth hurt. It didn't fix anything, but it did make complaining optional. Cooking clean, or trying to clean food, wasn't just about washing hands, it was about luck. Flies, dirt, animal droppings, constant. Campfires blackened everything. Pots rarely saw soap. So meals carried a hint of smoke, ash, and bacteria, the classic Western seasoning. Water, too, was risky. People boiled it when they remembered, but most times they didn't. And that's how Prairie Belly became the unofficial name for food poisoning. Still, hygiene improved slowly. By the 1870s, people learned to store meat in cool cellars or hang it in shade. They washed dishes with lye soap, harsh but effective. Some even filtered water through cloth before boiling. Tiny steps, big difference. Women and domestic hygiene. Frontier women were often the guardians of health quietly, constantly. They insisted on washing vegetables, cleaning utensils, covering food from flies. They brewed herbal teas to fight stomach aches, peppermint, chamomile, sassafras. Some women carried vinegar mothers, living starters that made disinfectant vinegar. They'd wipe tables, rinse cloths, even clean wounds with it. They didn't know it was antiseptic, they just knew it worked. Children, sugar, and the sweet curse once sugar arrived on the frontier. Oh, it changed everything. Pies, candies, molasses, cookies, all the joys of decay. Children loved it. Dentists, when they appeared, made fortunes from it. Early dental ads in the 1880s promised beautiful teeth restored, painless extraction. Lies, of course. But the sugar rush was unstoppable. Its ironic civilization brought both toothbrushes and cavities in the same wagon. Oral remedies, DIY dentistry got a toothache. Frontier cures were endless and terrifying. Some chewed cloves to numb the pain. Others stuffed cotton soaked in whiskey or kerosene. Yes, kerosene. A few boiled willow bark, nature's aspirin, and prayed. If infection set in, you were out of luck. People believed toothaches were caused by tooth worms. So they smoked pipes of henbane to drive the worms out. They didn't, but they sure felt weird afterward. The cultural side of eating meals were more than fuel, they were identity. A family that ate together stayed together, mostly because cooking was exhausting. Camp cooks were legends. On cattle drives, the chuck wagon cook decided morale. A bad cook could start mutiny faster than a bad boss. Their rules were sacred. No talking near the fire. No stealing biscuits before grace. And whoever washed dishes last ate last. Even hygiene had hierarchy. Table manners, the civilizing bite. As towns grew, so did etiquette. People started setting tables, plates, forks, napkins. They washed before eating, brushed after if they could. Restaurants appeared, actual menus, not just beans or beans. And with that came the expectation of cleanliness. You didn't want to dine next to a dusty drifter. Clean hands meant good company. The West was learning to chew politely. From campfire to kitchen, by the 1890s, stoves replaced open fires. Cast iron cookware became prized possessions. Soap, water, and cloth towels became normal kitchen tools. That shift from survival to sanitation changed everything. Food lasted longer, people got healthier, and mouth hygiene followed. Homemade toothpaste recipes included baking soda, chalk, honey, and peppermint oil. Brushes had boar bristles and bone handles, fancy stuff for the middle class. Brushing once a day became the sign of refinement. Twice a day was pure luxury. The humor of decay, people joked about it too. Newspapers ran comic sketches. The cowboy dentist, one yank fits all. There were ads for tooth powders promising breath as sweet as prairie bloom. Reality was less poetic, but humor softened the horror like it always does. Because the truth was, everyone suffered the same. From mayors to miners, toothaches were the great equalizer, the rise of clean food. Canning technology transformed diets. Peaches, tomatoes, meats preserved in tin and hope. Clean food became accessible, and with canned goods came hygiene awareness. Labels warned against bulging cans, beware of the swell. The first consumer safety advice on the frontier. People learned. Cleanliness didn't just save faces, it saved lives. Oral culture, literally frontier songs and tailies, often joked about teeth. Old Joe lost his chompers to a mule's bad kick, still smiles anyhow. Humor was survival. If you could laugh at your missing molars, you could endure another day. A mirror of modern times, listen closely and you'll hear echoes of today. We chase organic food, fluoride and whitening strips. They chased clean water, twigs and salt. Different tools, same goal. Stay alive, stay presentable, stay human. The Wild West wasn't dirty because it wanted to be. It was dirty because it was busy being born. The poetry of clean: when a cowboy finished a meal, wiped his mouth, and smiled with half his teeth. He wasn't ashamed. He'd earned that grin. Cleanliness out there wasn't about perfection. It was about effort, choosing decency amid chaos. Every scrubbed plate, every rinsed cup, every brushed tooth was a tiny declaration. We may be in the wilderness, but we're not wild anymore. Closing reflection. By the turn of the century, dentistry professionalized. Cities had dental schools. Soap came in wrapped bars. Toothpaste arrived in tubes. And those who had lived through the dust and grime looked at their children, bright smiles, clean hands, and thought, we built this. With grit, grease, and a bar of soap. The story of hygiene isn't just about cleanliness. It's about control, about humanity refusing to surrender to filth, no matter how harsh the land. And that truly is the heart of the West. There's a saying from the old frontier, God made dirt and dirt don't hurt. Well, that's one way to stay optimistic while living ankle deep in it, because out there, sickness wasn't a question of if, it was when. The frontier body, dust in your lungs, heat on your skin, mosquitoes the size of nickels. The Wild West was a full-time assault on the human immune system. There were no hospitals, no urgent care clinics, no pharmacists with bright white coats. Just people stubborn, inventive, and usually broke, trying to keep each other alive. Illness traveled fast. A cough could sweep through a wagon train like gossip through a saloon. Typhoid, cholera, dysentery, the classics. They weren't villains in black hats, but they were the real killers of the West. The doctor problem. If you found a doctor, congratulations, you'd found someone with a sharp knife and good handwriting. Medical school was optional. Some trained for a year. Some just bought the title along with their stethoscope. And the rest learned by trial, error, and occasionally grave misfortune. A patient might walk in with a stomachache and leave missing an organ or a limb. Still, frontier doctors meant well. They hauled saddlebags full of tinctures, scalpels, and bravery, riding through rain and dust to save strangers for pennies. It wasn't glamorous. It was guts, literally and figuratively. Painkillers of the plains now. About pain, it was everywhere, so people found creative ways to forget it. Whiskey, obviously. Opium, laudanum, morphine, all common, all unregulated. You could buy them in general stores right next to buttons and bullets. A spoonful for the toothache, 2 for childbirth, 3 for heartbreak. Nobody talked about addiction because no one had time to. You either worked through the pain or drowned it in amber. Home remedies, hope in a jar. Before medicine was science, it was storytelling. If your grandmother said onion syrup cured coughs, you didn't argue. You boiled onions in molasses and believed. Got a fever, cold compresses. Got stomach trouble, charcoal and peppermint tea. Wounds, honey, vinegar, whiskey. Whatever stung the most probably worked the best. Some remedies were brilliant, others catastrophic. For example, black turpentine for lice. Effective but also flammable. Black mercury pills for nervousness. Effective at poisoning you slowly. Black snake oil for everything else. Yes, snake oil was real, or at least it was supposed to be. The original Chinese formula actually did help joint pain, but when it hit America, it turned into a traveling circus act of lies. The traveling medicine show. Imagine this. A horse-drawn wagon rolls into town. The man on the platform wears a red coat and a grin that could sell rain to a fish. He shouts, Dr. Goodwin's miracle elixir cures everything from baldness to boredom. People gather, music plays. A woman faints dramatically on cue. The crowd gasps. She drinks the elixir and recovers. Applause, sales, disappear by sundown. The American West was the birthplace of marketing, one bottle of colored water at a time. Real illness, real desperation, but when it wasn't a show, sickness got serious fast. Cholera could empty a town in weeks. Typhoid turned wells into weapons. Tuberculosis, the White Death, whispered through every crowded boarding house. Doctors prescribed fresh air and hope. Sometimes it worked. Usually it didn't. People learned to live beside death like it was a neighbor, unwelcome but expected. Childbirth and infection, we talked about it before. Childbirth on the frontier was bravery reborn daily. No antiseptics, no antibiotics, just water, towels, and the will to survive. Many women died not from childbirth itself, but from infection afterward, childbed fever. All because no one knew that washing hands saved lives. When germ theory finally reached the frontier decades later, it was like discovering magic. Soap suddenly became sacred. Native medicine, the wisdom before science, before settlers arrived. The land already had its doctors, the indigenous healers. They used roots, leaves, and rituals that worked better than most modern treatments. Willow bark for pain, that's aspirin before aspirin. Yarrow for wounds, sage for purification. Settlers borrowed what they could, though rarely gave credit. But those remedies shaped frontier medicine deeply, quietly, permanently. Quarantine, cowboy style, when someone got sick, towns reacted fast, sometimes too fast. Quarantine meant a red cloth tied to the door and everyone else avoiding you like bad luck. Families survived or didn't alone. If the sickness passed, neighbors brought food. If it didn't, they brought shovels. It sounds harsh, but compassion had limits when survival was on the line. Nursing on the edge women were the nurses, the doctors, the pharmacists, often all at once. They brewed teas, bandaged wounds, and sat by feverish children with damp cloths. They learned to read pulses and pray simultaneously. Frontier diaries are full of entries like, "John took ill, applied mustard poultice. He sweated much, seems better." That "seems better" was medicine's most honest phrase for 50 years. Quick fixes or quick farewells, there were hundreds of fast cures floating around. Most sounded like recipes for disaster. For colds, drink boiled vinegar and pepper. For fever, wrap yourself in blankets and sweat it out. For wounds, apply lard and tobacco. It's a miracle anyone survived long enough to invent hospitals. The town doctor, the West's unsung hero despite the chaos. Some doctors were extraordinary. They rode 50 miles in storms to deliver bobbies. They stitched gunshot wounds by lantern light. They operated with knives sterilized in fire. Their fees were modest, sometimes paid in chickens, flour, or gratitude. They weren't miracle workers, but they were believers in progress, in persistence, in humanity. When illness met faith, the church was often the only hospital. Sermons came with health advice. Cleanliness is next to godliness wasn't just moral, it was medical. People prayed for healing, and sometimes that faith alone made them fight harder. Because out there, belief could be stronger than medicine, and sometimes it was the only thing you had. Hygiene meets medicine eventually. People noticed something revolutionary. Clean people got sick less. Washing hands, boiling water, keeping wounds covered. Simple, small acts that changed the West more than any gun ever did. Soap turned into the quiet hero of civilization. A bar of lye could save more lives than a rifle. That's the untold part of the frontier, the one built not by outlaws but by soap makers. Herbal legends, every town had its granny healer, part apothecary, part wizard. She knew which plants numbed pain, which ones stopped bleeding, which ones killed you if you weren't careful. People whispered about her, half respect, half fear. But when the fever hit, they all came knocking. Her shelves held jars of dried herbs, roots dangling from rafters, a cat that never blinked. She'd brew you something bitter, slap your wrist, and tell you to sleep. And sometimes you actually got better. Frontier epidemics, when smallpox struck, towns shut down. Entire families vanished. Vaccines existed, but reaching the frontier took years. So some settlers carried scabs from infected people, dried, wrapped, used for crude arm-to-arm inoculations. Risky, absolutely. But compared to certain death, it was worth the gamble. That's the level of courage desperation creates. Death and dignity, despite every effort, many didn't make it. Graves dotted the land like punctuation marks in a long, hard story. Yet death wasn't feared the way we fear it now. It was expected, respected, part of life's rhythm. Funerals were simple, sometimes a song, sometimes silence, and then back to living, because survival demanded it. The shift towards science, by the late 19th century, the West began to modernize. Railroads brought doctors, supplies, microscopes, medical schools. Sterilization became routine. Painkillers became regulated. Snake oil faded under the weight of actual science. The line between superstition and knowledge finally began to clear, and people looked back on those rough days with awe, realizing they had survived an era when medicine and magic were still shaking hands. Humor and healing, frontier humor kept people sane. Sick, must have been the water or the cooking. Broken leg, at least it's not my shooting arm. Laughter wasn't denial, it was medicine. It reminded them that even pain couldn't claim their spirit. Every joke was a survival chant. Reflection, the cost of progress. We live now in a world of antibiotics, vaccines, sterile everything. And yet we complain about the hospital food. Imagine explaining that to a pioneer who treated infection with whiskey and prayer. They'd laugh and maybe envy us a little, but I think they'd also nod knowingly. Because deep down the fight is the same. We still fear illness, still chase cures, still cling to hope. Only our tools have changed. Closing thoughts, the Wild West wasn't clean, safe, or kind, but it was alive. And in that raw, relentless place, people learned what health truly meant. To endure, to adapt, to find remedies in a world with none. They didn't have doctors like ours, they had determination. They didn't have hospitals, they had homes. They didn't have medicine, they had willpower. And sometimes that was enough. So next time you pop an aspirin or run hot water for a shower, remember that comfort was bought with generations of grit, guesswork, and grit again. Because out there in the wild, wild west, cleanliness wasn't next to godliness. It was godliness. There's a moment at the end of every long trail when the wheels stop creaking, the dust finally settles, and you just listen. No gunfire, no wind, just the faint sound of your own breathing. That's where we are now. At the end of the long road west, a journey through grit, grime, and gallows humor. The story of hygiene in the Wild West isn't just about cleanliness. It's about civilization itself. How people in the middle of chaos slowly decided they wanted to live not just longer, but better. When dirt was destiny for decades, the frontier was filthy, and not by choice, by design. No running water, no plumbing, no soap unless you made it yourself. But here's the miracle: people still tried. They washed even when it took an hour to haul a single bucket. They bathed even when the water froze before the towel dried. They cared even when survival barely left room for dignity. That's not ignorance. That's hope wearing overalls. Civilization begins with soap. If you really think about it, the birth of modern civilization can be traced to two inventions: the bar of soap and the drain pipe. Once people started washing regularly, diseases plummeted. Childbirth became safer. Communities grew stronger. It wasn't heroics that tamed the frontier, it was hygiene. Not the gun, not the gold rush, but a bar of soap and a bucket of hot water. Imagine that. The whole myth of the West built on suds. From survival to self-respect. In the beginning, cleanliness was just survival. By the end, it became self-respect. Bathhouses popped up in mining towns. Laundries run by Chinese immigrants turned washing into an art form. Hotels began advertising indoor plumbing as the ultimate luxury. Even cowboys, yes, cowboys started combing their hair and scrubbing their boots before entering town. It wasn't vanity, it was pride. Because after years of mud and misery, people had learned. Clean didn't just feel good, it meant something. The quiet revolution. Most revolutions start with noise, gunfire, shouting, banners waving. But this one started with silence. The hiss of boiling water, the scrape of soap on skin, the sigh of someone who for once didn't smell like a horse. That was the real revolution. Quiet, humble, unstoppable. And it changed everything. The echo of dirt. Here's the thing though, even after the dust settled, the dirt never really left. We still carry it. In our history, in our humor, in our human messiness. We like to think we're civilized now, antiseptic, sanitized, digitally deodorized. But there's still a little frontier in all of us. Every time we get stubborn, every time we push through exhaustion, every time we laugh in the middle of disaster, that's the old dirt whispering, "You've survived worse." The frontier within the Wild West isn't a place anymore. It's a metaphor, a part of the human spirit that refuses to quit. You see it in hospitals, in storm shelters, in tiny apartments with people washing dishes under flickering lights. It's that instinct that says, I can fix this, I can clean this up, I can start again. That's the same voice the pioneers heard when they looked at the open plains. We've traded horses for Wi-Fi, but the struggle to live well, to live clean, remains the same. When comfort becomes invisible, we shower now without thinking. Hot water flows at the turn of a tap. Soap comes in dozens of scents, with names like Arctic Breeze or Morning Calm. Complain if the pressure's low. We sigh if the towel isn't fluffy enough. But 200 years ago, a bath was an event, a celebration, a small miracle after weeks of grit. Maybe we've gotten too clean to appreciate it. Modern dirt, and here's the twist: in cleaning up our world, we've made new kinds of dirt. Not on our bodies, but in our air, our oceans, our cities. Pollution, plastic, microfibers, invisible grime everywhere. So maybe the old pioneers weren't behind us after all. Maybe they were just the first ones to wrestle with the eternal truth. You can scrub and scrub, but dirt always finds a way. The poetry of soap and sweat, there's a strange poetry in all this. The way something as small as washing your hands connects centuries of humanity. Your hands, rinsing under clean water, do what a frontier woman once did at a frozen creek, what a cowboy did at a dusty trough, what a miner did with his last few drops of canteen water. It's the same motion, the same ritual, the same whisper of survival. Clean hands, not just hygiene. Heritage. Heroes of clean, we remember the sheriffs, the outlaws, the gold rush dreamers, but not the soap makers, the nurses, the mothers who boiled clothes until their knuckles bled. They were the real quiet heroes of the West, the ones who made life possible while others made history loud. If there's one thing this story teaches us, it's this: civilization isn't built by warriors. It's built by people who refuse to live in filth. The mop is mightier than the gun sometimes. The frontier's final gift, when you strip it all down, the horses, the dust, the shootouts, what the frontier really gave us was perspective. It taught us how fragile we are, how tough we can be, and how even in the dirtiest corners of history, someone always tried to make things a little cleaner. That right there is humanity in its purest form. Time to reflect, so pause, take a breath. Look around your clean room or messy one, no judgment. Every light, every pipe, every soap bubble is a chapter of that story. A story of people who refused to let the wilderness win. They fought it with buckets, brushes, and belief. And that fight continues every day. What we can learn from the Wild West, we inherit 3 lessons. 1. Cleanliness is courage. It's choosing to care when chaos says do bother. 2. Medicine begins with mercy. You can't heal what you don't love enough to protect. 3. Progress is patience. Civilization isn't built in explosions, it's built in routines. Every time you wash your hands, you're continuing that legacy. You're saying, I choose life even in the mess. That's powerful. A whisper to the modern listener: if you've made it this far, through the dust and the dirt and the dark, you've done exactly what they did. You've stayed curious. You've stayed kind. And maybe, just maybe, you'll never look at a bar of soap the same way again. The fade out, the frontier fades. The fires burn low. You can almost hear the crackle of a lantern and the quiet drip of water from a wash basin. Somewhere, a weary traveler scrubs the road from his hands, takes a deep breath, and feels finally clean. That's the sound of civilization breathing. That's the heartbeat beneath the dust. And that is the end of our trail. Candle epilogue from me to you: if you felt something while walking through this dusty old world, the laughter, the grit, the little moments of humanity, then hey, you're exactly who this story was meant for. Because MoonyGuide isn't just about history. It's about connection between past and present, between dirt and dignity. And if you'd like to keep traveling with me into new eras, new empires, new stories that remind us who we are, Candle, subscribe to the channel. Candle, turn on the notifications so you never miss when the next trail begins. We'll keep the fire burning, the kettle boiling, and the stories alive, one dusty, shining, stubborn episode at a time. This is MoonyGuide.